Thank you, everybody. We're going to share a teaching, as Rabbi Sari mentioned earlier in our service, related to this week's Torah portion, the last one in the book of Genesis. And these partial leading up to the end of Genesis are so exciting. Tells the story of Joseph and his brothers, his sister Dinah. There's drama, there's sibling rivalry, there's attempted murder. You got to read it if you haven't checked it out. It's amazing. And by the way, I should put in a plug for Spirit of Shabbat. Every Shabbat morning, 8:45 a.m. Last week, we were online only because it was New Year's Day, and we were preparing for whatever happens on New Year's Eve, which is Chinese food, or is that
No, that's
Christmas?
The week before.
Yeah.
Champagne.
Champagne, and then fall asleep at 9 p.m. Yeah. So, but this week, it's in person and online, 8:45 a.m. tomorrow morning. So Vayechi is a powerful, powerful end to the book of Genesis. And those of you joining from home, you're going to see the text. Those of you joining here, I'm just going to share the text with you. But Raj, you can put up text number 1. And this is from chapter 49 of Genesis. Jacob asks all of his children to come and gather around. He speaks specifically and mainly to his sons, even though there's at least one daughter. The Genesis suggests that there might be more daughters, actually, and certainly some granddaughters. But it's a patriarchal conclusion to a patriarchal book.
Amazing.
So we're not going to expect much on that level. But he brings his sons together, and he calls his sons and said, "Come together that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the days to come." So this is pretty exciting because it looks like we're going to get a window into the future. And Jacob's going to tell us what's going to happen. But then the very next verse, and Raj, you can put up text number 2, is a repetition of that verse, but it leaves out the part about seeing into the future. It says, "Assemble and hearken, O sons of Jacob, hearken to Israel your father." It says nothing about what will come in the time to come. And the great medieval commentator Rashi notices this, that in 49 verse 1 it says, come kinder, and I'll tell you what's going to happen in the future. But in 49 verse 2, it just says, "Come kinder, and I'll tell you some stuff." And Rashi says that Jacob wanted to tell his sons what would happen in the future, but the Shechinah, which is, sort of God's feminine side, God's presence in this world. See, for a patriarchal tale, we did get Shechinah. The Shechinah comes and says, no, don't tell them. So for some reason, God didn't want Jacob to reveal this. And then I was listening to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks' podcast this year, even though he is no more. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, even though he has left this world, his podcast goes on because these recordings were made, obviously, before he died. And he notes that Judaism is not a fatalistic religion at all. We don't believe that the future is determined, that everything is set out, and that this verse, these two verses sort of suggest that to us. Jacob wanted to tell us what would happen in a more fatalistic kind of way, and then, nope, God won't let him, or Jacob decides not to. Whatever the case may be, Rabbi Sacks suggests to us that we get to influence the future. It's not entirely in our control, but it's certainly not entirely determined either. And then Jacob, when your kids walk out in the middle of your teaching, it's okay.
Like, wow.
It's okay. They have stuff to do. It's okay. It's okay, kids. Go. So then Jacob shares his final words with his sons.
I've got words too.
And there you go. And so I wanted to ask you, Rabbi Sari, how do you understand these parting words? Because they're not all positive. You might think the last thing I'm going to say to my kids is just like, I'm going to focus on the good stuff. But that's not exactly how it plays out. What do you make of that?
So I'm looking at all of these Y school students and actually everyone, right, and thinking when we think of the idea of a blessing, right, if we, give me a blessing, I'm guessing that if I asked you, what's a blessing, someone would say, joy, hope, growth, success, right? We think of blessings generally as sort of a positive offering, but the blessings and the language that is used as a blessing, right? Jacob is giving these final blessings are really sort of these double-edged swords. There's one, I actually can't remember if it's Ruvain or Asher, right? Who he basically says like, yes, you're going to be successful, but no one's going to respect you, right? Like they're each sort of these double-edged swords of like, this is what your success will look like or your growth, but also this is your Achilles heel. This is the thing that's going to sort of haunt you all the way.
Painfully honest.
Right, painful
at times.
truth,
Yes.
exactly. Some of you know I had the honor this morning, I started my day in Sacramento, where I was honored to be a part of an interfaith service for Governor Newsom's inauguration, and I got to speak about this double-edged sword, right, the potential and pitfall of new beginnings. But I was also really deeply moved. The Right Reverend, such a good title, the Right Reverend Megan Traquair, who's the bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Northern California, talked about the date, right? And she said that obviously, I think for January 6th, to steal some other historical words, is a day that a little bit will now live in infamy. But she noted that, something I was not totally aware of, that in most Christian traditions, today, this day on the calendar, is also the Feast of the Epiphany, which is the day on which the Magi spread the good news, meaning the day that Jesus' birth was announced into the world. And I was thinking about this idea of sharing good news, and thinking about this idea that we don't actually live in a world here in America, right, in any way where there's only good news. And I'm thinking that I think one of the things we learned from Jacob is that hearing only good news doesn't always serve us, right? It doesn't make us face reality all the time. So I wanted to offer a teaching, and Roz, this is text number 3 from Rabbi Cheryl Peretz from right across the way at the American Jewish University. And she says, so what was so important for them, meaning Jacob's sons, to hear? The criticism, their past mistakes, or she says, or perhaps what Jacob wanted them to hear was that despite the challenges they faced and the consequences of their actions, each was still a part of the family, still welcome at his side. And furthermore, he wants them to know that each of them would be part of the new nation in formation. The past was not forgotten, rather it had become a part of who they were and where they stood. Regardless of what they had done in the past, they would remain part of the covenanted people and would continue to carry with them their strengths, their weaknesses, their experiences, and their witnesses, which I think is true for all of us. And so I want to say that I think our good news, right, the good news that Jacob is sharing even in this painfully honest way, he's saying that, right, we're supposed to be ever aware that we are children of the divine, that in our pitfalls and our powers, we are created in God's image, and that no matter what, no matter how we mess up and mess up and mess up again, that we are always a part of the covenant. And so, Rabbi Yoshi, what do you think we're meant to learn from this? I mean, it really is. It's a foundational text, and it's a summation. It's the end of the family story before we go into a national story of Exodus. And so maybe especially today, January 6th, there's some lessons to learn.
Thank you, and thank you for that beautiful teaching from Rabbi Peretz, and reminding us that, you know, the speaking the truth, sometimes the painful parts of it, sometimes the beautiful parts of it, that's sometimes part of what it means to be a family too, is that you get to share those kinds of conversations with one another. I want to try to pull it together with a wonderful text that I came across in a great anthology of Jewish Hasidic and mystical teachings called Iturei Torah. And this is taught in the name of Rabbi Isaiah Halevi Horowitz, who's known as the Shla, because of the book he wrote called Shnei Luchot HaBrit. And going back to that verse that we started with, chapter 49, verse 1, and now you can, Roz, put up text number 4, because this is Rabbi Horowitz's interpretation of that verse. Remember, the verse we started with said, Jacob called his sons and said, "Come together, that I can tell you what shall befall you in the days to come." And Rabbi Horowitz focuses on the coming together. He said Jacob wanted to reveal to his children the secret of redemption. That's the code of, I'll tell you what will happen in the days to come. I'm going to tell you the secret of redemption. And then he says to them, here's the secret of redemption. Are you listening? Come together. You see? Did you catch it? That's the secret of redemption. Come together. Redemption cannot happen if there's enmity between us, if there's divisions, if there's constant infighting. I mean, it's hard to imagine in this perfect America of today, in this perfect world of today, that you could have, what vote are we up to? Is it the 17th vote? Constant
18
infighting.
votes, 18? We
Right,
could get
18.
to high.
No, I mean, we can joke about that, but it's not funny. It's you know, it shows us that there's so so much enmity. And this is just in one political party, but now we can broaden it out and we can look at our entire country, our entire world. You'd say there's so many divisions. How can we ever hope for redemption? The secret is we have to find a way to come together, and we have to put our community before our own personal interests. We have to put our country before the interests of a particular political desire that we might have. We have to put our whole world before the interests of the self. So the coming together is what actually gives me hope. And I think we've seen time and time again that ultimately we can make those things happen. We can find the way to come together. So I want to thank you, Rabbi Sari, for representing our congregation today in Sacramento. And thank goodness you made it back in time, because they scheduled it so that all the clergy could be back on their various bimot.
I was the only one who
for
had to get
Shabbat.
back for
You
Friday.
really had to
Yeah,
get
exactly.
back. So.